At Dr. Zellickson's wedding, there were several Rabbonim, non-Lubavitchers, 2 I believe, who came from the Yekeshe Kehillah, from the Washington Heights community. And the Rebbe participated in that wedding. He actually went to the hall and he spoke several sichos before the chuppah. And there were some exchanges between the Rebbe and these Rabbonim. One of the exchanges was that one of the Rabbonim said to the Rebbe spoke a big arichas about Chanukah and Mesiras Nefesh. And one of the Rabbonim mentioned to the Rebbe that he doesn't learn Nister, he learns only Nigla. He doesn't learn the secrets of the Torah, he learns only the Nigla of the Torah. And the Rebbe's response to him was very interesting. The Rebbe said to him, As du lernst dem nit, is a Nister. If you don't learn it, it's a secret. Aber du hast dem lernen, if it's a Nigla. If you'll learn it, it'll be revealed. In other words, implying it's only a secret because you don't learn it. If you would learn it, it would cease to be a secret. This was sort of the Rebbe's comment. This is a very interesting comment, and let me give you a context. The Ramban wrote a Pirush on Chumash, and in his Pirush on Chumash, he says in his introduction that he's going to explain in Yonam Kabbalah, and he writes, "Don't even try to understand. Don't even bother. You'll never understand it correctly." So, of course, I remember reading that Pirush and scratching my head and asking myself, "Well, why write a Pirush if no one's going to know what it means?" Juxtapose these 2 comments against one another. Here's the Ramban, who's revealing Nister and says, you're not going to understand it even though it's revealed. Here's the Rebbe saying, it's only Nister because you don't learn it. If you learn it, it'll become Nigla. How do you reconcile these 2 comments? And you could probably find numerous other comments to throw into the mix to create a more complicated model of this question. And I'm going to tell you what I think the answer is, and I don't know, obviously, but I think the answer is that this is the difference between Kabbalah and Chassidus, or Kabbalah before Chassidus and Kabbalah after Chassidus. Kabbalah by itself is a secret. It's not only a secret because people don't learn it, it remains a secret even after you've learned it. As well as you understood it, you remain unclear about it because it's abstract. Chassidus makes Nister Nigle. Chassidus, Chabad, the Alter Rebbe, the Maamorim, the Mesholim, the Avonav Saga allows that the secrets of the Torah should be intellectually available on a level where if you learn it, you can properly understand it. You have sichos from the Rebbe where he spoke about the Samach Vov and the Ayim Beis, and he says you can understand the deepest inyanim of Chassidus as a dvarim muchshim, vivid things, you can almost see them physically. So my personal opinion is that the Ramban, who was the very, very beginning of the revealers of Sod, says, I'm revealing Kabbalah, but it's meant to be a secret even after I reveal it. And the Rebbe, who's at the very end of the revealing of Sod, says, Sod is not a Sod anymore, unless you want it to be. Kabbalah has been brought to us on a level we could properly understand it, intellectually understand it. Like it says in the introduction to the Inyana Shal Torah Chassidus, that the Rebbe, of course, said and then wrote and so forth, that one of the purposes of Pnimiyas HaTorah is you should have Hasaga and Alakus. You should understand godliness, and it should be, Hasagas HaShlil and Hasagas HaChiv. It should be thorough, proper comprehension. At this point, the person could learn the secrets of the Torah and make them non-secret, reveal them. I am saying this comment because we're going to learn tonight the second half of the Maamar that we started last week. And it's only a separate class because there was too much to say and not enough time to say it in. Sometimes we'll divide a Maamar in half because there's 2 points. I mean, this Maamar also has 2 points, but even last week we started the second point. So this is sort of in the middle of something. We're in the middle of a conversation. So I'm just sharing with you that we're learning about the Merkava, about the divine chariot. It's written in Tanakh. It's forever been a mystery. It's never been a secret. No one's ever properly comprehended it. And when you learn Chassidus, or when you're exposed to Limud HaChassidus, then even when you learn these mysteries in non-Chassidic Sfarim, your background and your sense allows you to understand. You can understand these inyanim. You can understand the Merkava. The Maimorei Chassidis on the Merkava don't necessarily give you pshat of the Merkava. They give you chassidus of the Merkava. In other words, you could read and understand the Merkava of Yeshaya and Yecheskel based on the psukim and the rishonim that comment on it, especially the Rambam and the Meir Nevuchim, who does an incredible job in explaining the Merkava. And I'm so moved by what the Rambam does. He does something masterful, brilliant, classic Rambam. The Rambam wants to explain the Merkava to you. He doesn't want to write 100 pages because he'll confuse you and confuse himself. On the other hand, he wants you to understand. So the Rambam does something so extraordinary, so Maimonidean, so Rambam-esque. It's so exactly him. The Rambam explains nothing. Nothing, not a word, of the whole Merkava. And he has 8 prakim explaining the Merkava. And how can you have 8 prakim and explain nothing? Simple. Rambam simply tells you what to think about. He goes to the Merkava and says, think about this, and think about this, and think about this. And this is important, and this is very important. And this looks insignificant, but really has meaning. Like the date, and the year, and the month, and the place. The Rambam simply gets you to think. The whole beginning, the first 8 prakim of the Meir Nevuchim Chelik Gimel are the Rambam's dissertation on the Merkava of Yecheskel. And the way it works is, as the Rambam writes in the introduction, that his Sefer is not necessarily written in any particular order. He writes that he deliberately wrote it in a disorderly way to make it unavailable to the commoner. So the whole second half of Chelik Beis is about Nevuah, and he spills over into the first few prakim of Chelik Gimel, where he talks about the Merkava. I think it's the first 8 prakim, because beginning with Teirik Test, the Rambam starts talking theology, much more practical. I mean, the Teirik Gimel, the Meir Nevuchim, Chelik Gimel, the Meir Nevuchim is much more down to earth. But the first 8 prakim are the Merkava. He doesn't explain anything. He just says, I'm telling you what to analyze. And by doing this, in a few pages, he delivers the Merkava to you on a silver platter, because by telling you what to think and how to think, he brings you into that world. And he doesn't overwhelm you by telling you the thought, because then it would take too long and it would be overwhelming. He allows you to come to it on your own, and you get... A person who hasn't learned Chassidus reads that, comes away with nothing. But if you have learned Chassidus, you're constantly saying, Here's a Maamar on the Merkava. And there are many Maimarim on the Merkava, obviously. First of all, there's Gemaras on the Merkava and Chagiga and so forth. The Maimarim don't tell you the pshat. They add a depth. This Maamar adds an unusual depth, an extraordinary depth. What this Maamar does, and we learned this last week, and we're going to repeat the essence of last week's class, and then we're going to proceed, is that this Maamar observes a question. How come we start off with the word chayos and then we suddenly shift to the word chayo? How come there are 4 malachim and all of a sudden the 4 malachim converge into one? It's like Yankov Avinu, vayikach me'avnei hamokim, and then all of a sudden he has even achas kind of thing. You start off with many chayas and then you have chayachas. And this Maamar answers that question by saying that the very same Merkava can be construed from 2 perspectives. When you're looking at the Merkava from eye level, so to speak, as you're, so to speak, on the realm of the Merkava, there's many different malachim who all contribute to carrying the seat, the kisei, on which Adam Elakus rests. But if you step back, you look at it from a different perspective, all of a sudden the Merkava becomes one point, mikshachas, one essence. It's one animal, it's one chay, it's one malach that divided up into many aspects, but there's a unity when you see it from a makif, from a more distant perspective. And our Maamar explained to us that neither discounts the other. They're both not only equally true, but simultaneously true. And to use classic Hasidic language, when you look at the Merkava from the perspective of Mamale Kol Alman, you see diversity. You look at the very same Merkava from the perspective of Sefer Kol Alman, you see unity. And that's what the Maamar is trying to do, is to reveal to us these 2 different perspectives. The Maamar, of course, connected it to a variety of different things, including Sfiras Ha'omer versus Shvuas. Sfiras Ha'omer would be like relating to godliness from a Mamalik Alaman perspective, Shavuos itself, the 50th gate, would be relating to the Merkava from a level of Sevav Kalaman, and the same is of course true of Moshe Rabbeinu. Why was Moshe Rabbeinu the one, Nitna Tair al Yadai, like the Rebbe says in the first Maamar? Because Moshe Rabbeinu was in the level of the 50th gate. You'll see tonight, in Mitzvah Shem, that the Rebbe is going to juxtapose Moshe Rabbeinu and Avraham Avinu, which is a classic juxtaposition. And he's going to say the same thing. Avraham Avinu was like Mamalik Alaman, and Moshe Rabbeinu is like Sevav Kalaman. Avraham Avinu brings us godliness on a level which is, so to speak, equal to us. So we experience the limitation, the diversity of godliness. Moshe Rabbeinu brings to us godliness which is beyond us, and therefore we see the Gilui of a Lakus from Moshe Rabbeinu's perspective as being a mikshachas, as being a unity. One of the more interesting little details we're going to have tonight is we're going to compare the Torah to the Shleishes Midas Harachamim. The Torah is Mamalik Alaman, the Shleishes Midas Harachamim. Sevav Kalaman, it's like the idea of Avraham, like the idea of Moshe, and so forth. So that's what happens here. We're taking a pasuk in the Merkava that everybody knows and exposing that you could see the Merkava from different perspectives. Now, I want to start learning. I want to start teaching the Maamar. I just want to make one simple observation. I told you last week that the Merkava of Yecheskel Zelma Yitzira, when you learn this Maamar, you get the distinct impression that the Merkava is Atzilus and Keser, Atzilus and higher than Atzilus. I'm not losing sleep over it. It doesn't bother me that Rebbe, one pasuk can have a variety of different meanings, but nevertheless, this is true. A purist is going to say that the Merkava of Yecheskel is considered Yitzira. Ben Kfar Sheras HaMelech versus Ben Krach Sheras HaMelech, which is of course how Yeshaya sees it and so forth. And I sort of mentioned this last class, although I didn't spell out this particular point. But this Maamar is going to read the Merkava on these two levels, Hishtalshalos and higher than Hishtalshalos, Mamalei and Seviv, Avraham and Moshe, Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim and Torah, and so forth. So let's begin. And I am going to commit a sin and start again from line 40. Let's go back to line 40 and introduce the idea that this duality of the Merkava, the Seviv of Mamalei, explains why the Torah was given through Moshe Rabbeinu. V'hinei, the one who brings us the Merkava on the level of Seviv Kalalman is Moshe. On the level of unity is Moshe Rabbeinu. Like it says in the Pasuk, Moshe Rabbeinu reveals the Torah. Ki alav nema, regarding Moshe Rabbeinu, it is written, Vatchasrei yomiat me'elikim, that he was one drop less than Elikim. In other words, Shekol memtas sharebin nimsrulei, was given the 49 gates, and at the 50th gate, however, because the 49 gates were already his. Hayakod or l'shadach hamishim was very near the 50th gate, lahamshich, meant to draw it down, and that's why he was eichad nitn teir al yad. In other words, the event of Matan Torah is revealing the 50th gate. Moshe Rabbeinu was the suitable candidate to reveal the 50th gate. You'll see later on that Torah itself is actually Hishtalshalos, is the lower level. But Matan Torah, the event of the giving of the Torah, was the higher level, the Ma'alam Hishtalshalos. Which is why Moshe Rabbeinu brought us not only the Torah, but Hayud Gimel Midas Harachamim, the 13 attributes of mercy, which are higher than the Torah. For the Kabbalists keeping score at home, Torah would be Atzilus. The Gimel Midas Harachamim would be Keser, which is higher than Atzilus. Or as it says in Chassidishe, by Matan Torah it says Anechi Hashem Elokecha, and by Tshuva, which is connected to the Gimel Midas Harachamim, it says Anechi Humoichi Pshacha Lemani, and so forth and so on. There's many Anoichis, double Anoichis, because it goes on Keser. It says in Zayar that Vayikra goes on Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was the one who calls and reveals the 13 attributes of mercy that are higher than Torah. The Vayikra Koyal Moshe Rabbeinu is doing the calling. And he's the one who brought down the 13 attributes of mercy, which are higher than the Torah itself. When it says Havaya passed Moshe Rabbeinu. In other words, Moshe went to higher than Havaya, and he called Vayikra Moshe the 13 attributes of mercy. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu revealed Shehei Mekedes Leishtalshos Ha'elames. He revealed the 13 attributes of mercy, which are the source of the chain reaction of worlds, and higher than them, Atzilus v'chol, the worlds of Atzilus, and lower than Atzilus. So Moshe Rabbeinu gave us the Torah. Torah you'll see soon as Atzilus. But the event of Matan Torah is Sha'ar Anun, is higher than Atzilus. And Moshe Rabbeinu gave us the Shleish Midas Harachmim. And I can't resist but to mention this, that the Maamarim that the Rebbe said, Peches, the feed, he came from Maamar Asara, Sheyesh Ve'iskim B'Teira. Schneur, of course, he explains that just like you have Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim, you have the Gimel Midas Shatayra and the Deshes Bahem. Just like higher than Hishtalshalus is the 13 attributes of mercy, higher than Teira, in as much as Teira is Hishtalshalus, is the 13 Midas by which Teira is interpreted. This, of course, links to the idea that Teira Shabbat Peh is higher than Teira Shabbat Ksav, and so forth. But you'll see momentarily that Teira by itself is Hishtalshalus. In other words, Teira by itself sees the Merkava as Chayois Loshen Rabim, Medida Vagbala, and the 13 attributes of mercy is higher than Hishtalshalus. Line 52. V'zehu inyan neitzer chesed. This is the idea that amongst the 13 attributes of mercy, the 8th one is neitzer chesed. Hashem guards chesed. That neitzer has 3 translations. Neitzer is ACS tziner, which means a channel that delivers chesed. It's ACS ratzon, it means will. In other words, higher than limitation. Will is higher than limitation. V'gam pirish neitzer shemeri. And neitzer also means shemer, a guard. So if you combine these 3 translations, what does neitzer chesed mean? It's the will for kindness, the channel of kindness, and the protector of kindness. So if kindness would be the limited gift, neitzer chesed means the infinite power to deliver that finite gift, both in terms of tziner, as well as in terms of ratzon, as well as in terms of protecting it. He bechinas hashmira, this guards, and it's b'machshava, b'bechinas helam, and guarding means the way the kindness is still in the hidden, unrevealed state. It's the anticipation of actually giving the kindness, keidem shabal the gili, before it's revealed. So neitzer chesed is in the 13 attributes of mercy. Mash'en ke bechinas ve'oisa chesed. Where is the pasuk ve'oisa chesed? It's Naser Sadibris, the 10 Commandments. Ve'oisa chesed la'alafim dat la'oyav el-shem re mitzvayse. And of course in verse Chanin it says le'elev de'el la'alafim and so forth. 2,000, 1,000 esam ya'ava, esam yira. And the Rebbe observes that the 13 attributes of mercy are higher than the Torah, higher even than the Naser Sadibris. Because by the 13 attributes of mercy, it says neitzer chesed, which is higher than Hishtalshalus. And by the Aseret Sadibris, it says eisa chesed. Shebe'elam hazeh, ve'eisa hi bechinas tikkun. The word ve'eisa means Hashem corrects, prepares kindness. K'meiv also saw Sipaneh brings a proof from a pasuk. So you have 2 psukim that both speak about chesed. One is part of the Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim, which are higher than Hishtalshalus. And there it says neitzer. The other is part of the Aseret Sadibris, which is considered part of Hishtalshalus, where it says Oiseh. And these 2 concepts of neitzer chesed and Oiseh chesed are going to be consistent or in concert with the 2 perspectives in the divine chariot. When you look at the chariot from a perspective of Hishtalshalus, where it's Chayois, Loshen Rabim, it's Oiseh chesed, the kindness is coming to you in a measured way. As opposed to when you're looking at the same Merkava, but from a perspective of higher than Hishtalshalus, then it's neitzer chesed and it's an infinite kindness. And he connects it immediately to Avraham. And we're contrasting Avraham with Moshe. Hainu bechinas madreges Avraham, it's the level of Avraham Avinu, who is chesed, Atzilus, the chesed of Atzilus. While Moshe Rabbeinu is chesed, which is higher than Atzilus, which is why it says neitzer chesed and not oiseh chesed. Forgive my insertion, but let me tell you something interesting. When you learn Chassidus, you get the clear impression that Moshe Rabbeinu was in a class by himself, literally. Moshe Rabbeinu is alone. There's all the big tzaddikim, including Avraham, Yitro, Yankiv. Moshe is different. Why? Because all the tzaddikim, even the biggest tzaddikim, come from Atzilus. Moshe Rabbeinu comes from Keser. What's the difference? I'll tell you what the difference is. The difference is, the Zayar says, and it's brought in Usfartim and Samach Vav, that there are a number of tzaddikim who have their names repeated twice in the Chumash. Like you have Noach, Avraham, Yankiv, and Moshe. And you also have, of course, Hashem. And the Zayar makes an interesting observation. That whenever you have, so Rashi says in Chumash, first of all, that any tzaddik's name who's repeated twice. Why is it repeated twice? Lashon Chiba. Somebody you love, you repeat his name twice. Moshe, Avraham, and so forth. But the Zayed observes that between Avraham is pasuk time of Begavaya. There's a psik, an interruption. Avraham, pause, Avraham. The same is true as Yaakov. And the same is true Noach, and so forth. By Moshe Rabbeinu, it's not that way. It's Moshe. The Moshes are drawn. Moshe and Moshe go together. And the Zayed says, why? How come by Avraham, it's Avraham, Yaakov, and by Moshe, it's Moshe. So the Zayed explains because of the two Avrahams are Atzilus and Bria, and the two Moshes are Keser and Atzilus. In other words, Avraham was a very, very big tzaddik. He came from Atzilus. But the neshama of Atzilus of Avraham, as he comes down into this physical world, is very compromised. Like you know from Tanya, that Avraham Avinu says the amount of kindness I'm able to do physically versus how much kindness I have in Atzilus is like ash compared to a piece of wood. But not Moshe. Because Moshe is not how Atzilus is coming into Bria, but it's how Keser comes into Atzilus. And therefore, there's a very, very big difference between the double Moshe and the double Avraham. The double Avraham means the Avraham in spiritual terms is much more than the Avraham in physical terms. The double Moshe means that just as Moshe is godly on the higher level, that same godliness is delivered to the lower levels. In other words, when you start from Atzilus, when you come to the lower worlds, you're compromised. When you come from Kesed, you come till Asiya and there's no change. That's the real difference between Shloishes Midas HaRachamim and Torah. Torah is Atzilus. Even Aseres Adibris hears, Oiseh Chesed. It's a limited kindness. When that limited kindness is going to come into the lower world, it's going to be even more limited. Moshe Rabbeinu's Chesed is from the Yudgimel Midas HaRachamim, which is higher than Atzilus. And therefore it's Neitzer Chesed. The same Chesed as Moshe Rabbeinu has on that higher level is delivered till the lower worlds. And let's look at it inside. V'lachein, line 59. Therefore, Neitzer Chesed Ksiv Kaidem Peked Avinavis. The idea of Neitzer Chesed is written before Hashem talks about the idea of sin and having sins forgiven. That after you say Neitzer Chesed, that gives a koyach to correct Averis, because the correction of Averis comes from the koyach of higher than Seder Ishtashlus, which includes Neitzer Chesed. But by Avraham Avinu, by the Aseres Adibris, first it says Peked Avin, Hashem remembers the sins, and only afterwards Neitzer Chesed. Ksiv achar Peked Avinovis. And if I understand it correctly, this is what it means. When you bring down chesed from higher than Seder Ishtashlus, it erases sin. When you bring down chesed from Ishtashlus, the sin remains. So Peked Avin remembers our sin. And then there's Oiseh Chesed. But the Oiseh Chesed does not necessarily erase the sin because it's only a chesed of Ishtashlus. Mash'enken, as opposed to Neitzer Chesed hi bechinas Chesed shalamayla mayla miseder Ishtashlus, since the Chesed of Kesed is higher than Ishtashlus. Rakshu bechinas Mokah v'shed v'chulu, it comes down into Ishtashlus. It therefore has the koyach to correct sin. So there's many differences. By Torah, Oiseh Chesed comes after Peked Avin, because Peked Avin means Hashem is going to remember the sin. And by Yagimel Midas HaRachamim and Peked Avin comes after Neitzer Chesed, that because of Chesed L'mayla Mishtashas, Hashem is going to forgive us for our Averis. And the Rebbe continues, and he says, "Val Beis Bechinas Chesed." Now we now understand that there's something called the Merkava, and the Merkava exists on two levels: a level of Ishtashlus, and a level which is higher than Ishtashlus, on a level of Avraham Avinu, and a level of Moshe, on a level of Oiseh Chesed, and a level of Neitzer Chesed. On both of these levels, it then says La'alofim, that it comes down into alafim. What does alafim mean? Into alefs. And what follows is a very interesting discussion on the letter aleph. Very interesting. The Rebbe is going to analyze the letter aleph. Pirush, this means alafim madregis. Literally means 1,000 to 2,000 levels, but it means levels in the framework of many alephs. There's various different worlds. Each word is an aleph. A lot of worlds is a lot of alephs. That's the way you have to understand it. The inyan hamadreges, the concept of levels, line 70, sheimidarg madrega hamadrege, one level after another madrega. Now let me pause. The Rebbe spoke many times about the letter Aleph. First of all of us know, we have it originally in Hayom Yom, but there's actually an audio tape where the Rebbe mentioned this very, very, very emotionally, how the Alter Rebbe taught the Melamed of his son, the Mittel Rebbe, the meaning of the letter Alef. The Alef is a Yud on top and a Yud on bottom and the Vav in the middle. And you can hear the tape of the Rebbe telling the Vart with the Niggin with which the Alter Rebbe spoke, and the Rebbe is quite emotional. That the Yud on top goes on the Eibishter, the Yud on the bottom goes on the Yid, and the Vav is the Kav of Yid Shamayim. A Pintel von Eben, a Pintel von unten. And there's a Kav that's Mechaber. There's also, of course, the Vart that you teach the letters of the Aleph base by describing pictures which children can relate. Like Aleph is a man carrying two buckets of water. I saw one week in the Living Torah they had Mrs. Mintz. Says her daughter was in Yechidus and she was making trouble. So the Rebbe took a piece of paper and drew the oasis of the Aleph base, and each letter represented a different image, a different visual. And how she tells the story was the Rebbe asked her little daughter if she wants to keep it, and she said no. She stayed in the Rebbe's room. How the letters can be taught to children from images which are familiar to us. Another idea that Rebbe spoke about the letter Aleph is that the Aleph has three translations. Aleph on the lowest level means Aluf Shalela, master of the world. Aleph on a higher level is Lashon Ulfan of Alima, to teach and to learn. And Aleph on the highest level is Boisis Pele, a wonder. So the Aleph represents different levels. Higher than Ishtalshalos, and so to speak, lower than Ishtalshalos. Here the Maamar says that Aleph means levels. Aleph means a world. Alefim means many worlds. And the point is that whether a person is holding on the level of seeing the Merkava, in other words, the presence of God through Ishtalshalos, which is a diversity, which is a Madrega of Avraham, or a person is on the level of seeing the Merkava as one single unit, in other words, as it is from higher than Ishtalshalos to the Madrega of Moshe Rabbeinu. In both cases, there's La'alafim, how that godliness comes down to the various different levels. And he explains it. Hainu, what do we mean? That whether a person is relating to godliness on a level of Ishtalshalos and Mamalakalam, or one is relating to godliness on a level of higher than Ishtalshalos and Sevev Kalamin, the godliness comes down from level to level. For example, we all know that there's Madregas of Gan Eden, there's various levels of Gan Eden. And it says in Chassidishe, it says in Samach Vov, that there are infinite number of levels in Gan Eden. Each Gan Eden is an infinity, Tainu. And there are infinite levels of Gan Eden. In other words, there's infinity times infinity in terms of Gan Eden. The delight of godliness has so many different levels. And every time you go from one world to the next, you're making a quantum leap from one level of infinity to an infinitely removed second level of infinity. Madreg is Gan Eden Atacht. That when a person ascends to the lowest level of Gan Eden, coming from this world, there needs to be Nahar Dinur, a river of fire, Mafsik, that interrupts, Litbil Bay, in which one must immerse himself, should lose recollection of the physical world. Because if one would have any recollection of the physical world from which he is coming, it would be impossible for him to delight in Gan Eden. There's a Gemara that says, we of course table in water, because if we tabled in fire, that would be the last time we would table. But the person passes away, they go to a river of fire. And the river of fire is not a punishment. Gehenna is a punishment. The river of fire is a refinement. You want to get into Gan Eden, you have to forget. And every time you go from a Gan Eden to a Gan Eden, you go through a river of fire again to forget the old, to come into the new, because each level of Gan Eden compared to the level before is infinitely removed. How often do you have an aliyah? 3 times a day. In Samach Vav he adds, in addition to the river of fire, there's something called a beam, an amud. The river of fire makes you go out of the old, and the beam brings you up into the new. And between each level of Gan Eden and the other level of Gan Eden, that an Ar Maimin is called, between one Aleph and the next Aleph, you have to traverse this cleansing process to come into a new world, which is infinitely higher than the world from which you came before. Therefore, just like when you go from this world to the lower Gan Eden, You have to go through this river of fire when you go from one Gan Eden to the next Gan Eden. There's again a river of fire. To forget the perception and delight of that perception. In the lesser Gan Eden, to come into the greater Gan Eden. How often does this happen and how many levels are there? It happens many, many times. There are infinite numbers of Gan Edens. The Gemara tells us. The Gemara in Baba Mitzvah. That Abzed fasted 100 fasts. The Lish Gach Talmud Bavli, to forget Talmud Bavli, to learn Talmud Yerushalmi. Although Hagam Shalom and Talmud Bavli Chilur Rachim, Abzed's level was extraordinarily high. He did a whole story in the Gemara Baba Mitzvah that he learned Torah in such a way that he should not be able to be hurt by fire. And he actually used to test himself. That he was burnt on one occasion when he did this experiment. But Abzeda learned Torah at such a level where he was protected from fire. Nevertheless, when he went from Talmud Bavli to Talmud Yerushalmi, he had to purge himself further through this 100 fasts. So we see from this that there are many, many levels. And when you go from level to level, which is the same thing as going from Aleph to Aleph, the distance between one Aleph and the other Aleph is infinite, and if you have to go through this river of fire. Accordingly, there are thousands of levels. Madrega, step after step, aliyah higher and higher still. And whether you're climbing the ladder in the worlds of Ishtalshalos or higher than Ishtalshalos, there are all of these different levels, and to go from one to the next, you have to go through, so to speak, a river of fire. And again, the Maamar doesn't go into this, but you would have to say that if you are on the journey of Oiseh Chesed, of Ishtalshalos, the distance between one level and another level can't possibly be the same as if you're making a journey on the levels of Neitzeh Chesed. But the Rebbe says, whether you're in the journey of Neitzeh Chesed or Oiseh Chesed, in other words, whether you're relating to godliness on the levels of Ishtalshalos or you're relating to the godliness levels of higher than Ishtalshalos, there's so many levels for you to climb. From the lower level to the higher level. Line 85. V'chein, similarly, when godliness comes down from a higher level to a lower level, you also have these levels. Whether you're relating to the Merkava on the level of Ishtalshalos, Eiseh Chesed, or higher than Ishtalshalos, Neitzeh Chesed, there are all of these levels. But you'll see soon that it's not so simple. It's not exactly the same. That when the Alef means going down from a higher level to a lower level. In other words, these are various contractions. Tzimtzum acha tzimtzum, one tzimtzum after another tzimtzum. To create Gan Eden Elyon, the higher Gan Eden, which is Tiny Gan Avraham, and then of course Gan Eden Atachten, and all the different levels of Gan Eden. This is also called Aleph, but in this case, the Aleph is not learning and experiencing a wonder and ascending higher and higher, but rather bringing down from a higher level to a lower level. And the Rebbe says, V'nikin Aleph, and this is also called Aleph, as you're bringing from a higher level to a lower level, because there's another reason why Aleph is an Aleph. And that's the following. In other words, before we saw the Aleph as a journey upward, based on the idea that Aleph means to learn and Aleph means wonder, as I suggested before. But now Aleph means to bring down. How was the letter Aleph representative of bringing down? So he brings 2 points, or 3 points. Number one, the letter Aleph is the filler of Shem Havaya, Shema, Havaya b'mili Aleph. See, Yud Kei Vav Kei, the godly name Yud Kei Vav Kei is 26. Yud is 10, Hey is 5, Vav is 6, Hey is 5 is 26. But you could write out the Yud Kei Vav Kei. And when you write out the Yud Kei Vav Kei, technically you're supposed to have 10 letters. Yud Vav Dalid, Hey Aleph, Vav Aleph, Vav, and Hey Aleph. That's 10 letters. In one case it has 9, but normally it has 10, which goes in the 10 spheres. If you spell Yud Kei Vav Kei with as many Alephs as possible, Yud is going to be Yud Vav Daled, that's 20. Hey with an Aleph is going to be 6. Vav Aleph Vav is going to be 13. Hey Aleph is again going to be 6. 6 and 6 is 12. 12 and 13 is 25. 25 and 20 is 45. Shema. So there's a divine name Havaya connected to Alephs. Now what do we know about Havaya? Havaya means to bring down. And therefore, in addition to all the ideas of Aleph that we mentioned on line 68, which are how the Aleph represents ascent, there is also how the Aleph represents descent. It's the secret behind Shem Havaya. Shem Havaya brings from a higher level to a lower level. So just as before we understood Neitzer Chesed and Oiser Chesed, climbing the ladder of Aleph, we're now going to explain Neitzer Chesed and Oiser Chesed, bringing the godliness down from the higher levels to the lower levels. First of all, because Aleph is the Mili of Shem Havaya, and Havaya brings down. Number two, the Inyan Aleph Zu, when we're talking about Aleph in terms of bringing from a higher level to a lower level. He Aleph the Ekye, it's the Aleph of the divine name Ekye, which means Ano Osid V'Zamen Le'Izgalya, I will and I'm destined in the future to be revealed. Ki Aleph, because the letter Aleph is one of those Hebrew grammatical letters that's Meshamash Allah Osid, which always denotes future. Like Eilech, Eheyeh is always future tense. So the Aleph means what's going to be in the future. And mystically it means that in the future there will be a revelation. And of course revealing means to bring from a higher level to a lower level. So for this reason also the letter Aleph represents bringing godliness from a higher level to a lower level. And number three, v'gam kol yeridas ha'amshachas b'chinas Aleph. Anytime you bring something from a higher level to a lower level, it has the shape of the letter Aleph. So before I explain this third point, let's repeat. First of all, Aleph means to bring down because it's part of Shem Havaya. Second of all, Aleph means to reveal, which is to bring down, because Aleph is a letter which denotes future. And third of all, the very shape. What's the Aleph? It's a Yud and a Vav and a Yud. That means bringing from a higher level to a lower level. And here's how he explains it. Ki Am, on line 94. Ki. Aleph, the letter Aleph, Hu Yud Lamaila, Yud Lamata, and Vav Be'emtza. It has an upper Yud, a lower Yud, and a Vav. The Haidais. What does it indicate? Ki Hamshacha Shi Vav. The letter Vav brings from a higher level to a lower level. So first of all, it's Ba'a Ayedei Tzimtzum Shehi Ayud Shebereish. Before the Vav brings down, what's above the Vav has to be condensed. In other words, when God wants to give us something, what He chooses to give us, He condenses. That's the first Yud, and then He gives it to us through the Vav. Shebeladeh Yad Tzimtzum Hashem would not contract it to Yevshali Yisam Shachav His Galas Befanached. It can be revealed to us. Elahayah Hakal Inyanechad will be too infinite. So the Yud in the beginning shows how godliness is condensed, so that it can be brought down to us in a Vav. Now it says on line 102, V'yachakach, then there's a second Yud. Again, the godliness is condensed. Liyes k'mei Yud lamata, to be a second Yud. In other words, that the godliness, after it's been delivered to us, is received by us in a kernel, in a small way. Liyes misham, to be from there, b'chinas tzimtzum v'amshacha acheres, a second contraction, and a second bringing down. And this is a third explanation for why the letter Aleph represents not only how you climb the ladder of levels from a lower level to a higher level, but how you bring godliness from a higher level to a lower level. And the Rebbe continues, V'chein hu seder kol ha'ishtalshlus. This is true throughout the chain reaction of worlds of ishtalshlus. Hakelim b'chinas alpha, and the whole idea of bringing from a higher level to a lower level is a series of tzimtzum, reducing the light more and more and more. In short, what do we have? We have Neitzer Chesed and Eiser Chesed, Hishtalshlus and higher than Hishtalshlus. And the letter Aleph is useful both in explaining how you climb higher and higher in both arenas, and it's also helpful in explaining how you bring down lower and lower in both arenas. And the Rebbe now continues. V'zehu la'alaf. And this is what the word alafa means. Whether it's Be'eiser Chesed, which is a madrega of Avraham, Chesed of Hishtalshlus, or it's B'neitzer Chesed, which is the madrega of Moshe, which is Chesed of higher than Hishtalshlus. There's an Aleph. The Aleph represents worlds. Neitzer Chesed means the godliness of higher than Hishtalshlus, and the Aleph means how we climb higher and higher in this arena. Oiser Chesed means the Chesed of Hishtalshlus, and the Aleph means how we're climbing higher and higher in the arena of the godliness of Hishtalshlus. Alternatively, Neitzer Chesed means the godliness is higher than Hishtalshlus, and the Aleph means how godliness is brought lower and lower and lower. And Oiser Chesed means the godliness of Hishtalshlus, and again the Aleph represents how bringing it lower and lower and lower. And the Rebbe continues, line 109. B'hine, b'chinas Avraham, the level of Avraham Avinu, is Hishtalshlus, is Be'eiser Chesed. So there's many levels where you can ascend, many levels that you could descend. However, Nimshech Rak B'Atzilas, it's limited to Atzilas. In other words, since the godliness of Hishtalshlus is limited to start with, the idea of climbing or descending is within the framework of that godly realm. The Iyu v'chayei echad, only in the world where godliness and Him are one, can you have all of these levels. Ki hamshacha zu, because the godliness which is brought down by Avraham Avinu, Himizayim, Sheina, Sheina, and Chakim is the other divine names of the Eibishter. Shehu, Bimem Tesemei Asfira, which goes to the 49 days of Sfira. Shom Yesh Gamkin, Alef Madregas, there's also thousands of levels. But it's all in Ishtalshal. So this is the way it works. Godliness that's limited can only descend low in a measured way. But Moshe Rabbeinu was bringing down chesed from Kesed, from higher than Ishtalshos. In other words, this is the 50th gate, Shehu HaKesed. And of course, it says in Kabbalah that Kesed is Teracham, with the 620 pillars of light, or beams of light, which brings godliness from higher than Ishtalshos into lower than Ishtalshos. Kamayamud, like a beam. Shemechaber Mailu Mata, which combines the highest levels with the lowest levels, says the Rebbe Valachain, and as a result, Himshach Gam Babiyah. Moshe is special. He brings godliness to the lowest worlds, that even in Elam is Hanefradim, in the world of divisions. Misham Yiparad V'Gemer, where godliness is divided and concealed, Moshe Rabbeinu's Keach is brought there as well. So the Maamar is telling us that the Merkava of Moshe Rabbeinu is an effect of a Merkava which is higher than Seder Ishtalshalos, and therefore it's able to be brought even to the lowest Madregas. And the Rebbe concludes with Kabbalah words. I don't know how else to say this. Moshe Shapir Ka'amrit. Moshe speaks truth. Rava Bechinas Moshe. Rav is the level of Moshe. Rabbi Yosef Omar Morad Avraham. Rabbi Yosef, when he wanted to make a declaration, would say Morad Avraham, because his neshama comes from Avraham and not from Moshe. In other words, each one of the Tanoim and the Merahihem knows his level. V'chol Rashi Yeshivas shebechol deir. All the Rosh Yeshivas in all generations, hein bechinas Moshe, are connected to the Madrega of Moshe Rabbeinu. Sharehu hamamshech hadechilu urechim, he brings down Yid and Ava all the way to the lowest worlds, and therefore the Gedei Yisrael have a connection to Moshe Rabbeinu. What did I just say? What did we just read? We just read that there's different kinds of tzaddikim. In other words, some tzaddikim are like Avraham Avinu, which means they're only able to bring down godliness and Madrega of Ishtalshalos. The Rosh Yeshivas, those who teach Torah, are able to bring down godliness from higher than Seder Ishtalshalos, which is like the Madrega of Moshe Rabbeinu. So if you wanted to, now we finished this time, yeah? You want to take something out of this. This is Kabbalistic. I mean, there's a lot of familiar Chassidic ideas, but what, if any, practical lesson could you derive from this Maamar? In short, what the Maamar is saying is that to bring something to a lower level has to come from a higher source. This is represented by Moshe Rabbeinu and so forth and so on. So let's just say a very, very simple thought. A simple thought to which we all are familiar and by which we are all challenged. The lowest thing we could do as Jews is an action. The source of that action is on the highest levels. The loftier things we can do as Jews is understand and feel and experience. But the understanding and the feeling and the experience remains in the spiritual realms. In other words, if you want to compare Moshe to Avraham, what is the comparison? Moshe made mitzvahs, behavioral action. Avraham Avinu's mitzvahs and Yiddishkeit were entirely spiritual. Moshe Rabbeinu's mitzvahs are expressed in physical behaviors that transform the physical world because they come from the highest levels. Avraham's Yiddishkeit was experienced only spiritually because it came from a lower level of spirituality than did Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu's spirituality was so high, it translates into a behavior. Avraham Avinu's spirituality was lower, and it doesn't translate into behavior, which of course teaches us the most important lesson of all. In our own lives, the ultimate measure of everything is what we do, is action. Action sometimes is lacking inspiration. Inspiration is usually very rewarding. We love passions, feelings, and spiritual experiences. But the Maamar teaches, any time you're able to do an action, that action is coming from the deepest place within yourselves. You know, the famous Sefer HaChinuch, the Chassidus always cites, Acharei ha'pu'ulos nimshachim halavavis. You want to draw your heart in, do a deed. Why? Because the deed is rooted in a higher level. And it's because it's rooted in a higher level, it shows itself on a lower plane. So it'll draw the heart, so to speak, the Avraham Avinu, the spiritual you, along with itself. And we all know this in our lives. We all know this in our lives. There are things that we have a hard time doing. And getting them done is a graduation. Getting them done on the practical level is a sign that on the highest levels of ourselves, we have grown, we have healed. And that's, I think, one of the real messages we could take out of this Maamar.